Hi, friends, and welcome back to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. Today's episode is going to be chock full of so much information. I'm going to be talking Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I'm going to be talking RHONY, the finale, the end of the finale, which, there was some resolution, and I do have a lot to say about that. Also going to be talking about Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and if there is time, Southern Charm. And for those of you who follow my Patreon and my subscribers, I posted a little DM that Austin Kroll sent me to my Patreon. So let's just say he DM'd me and he was not happy, and he was letting me know that I suck. So if I get a chance to talk about Southern Charm, I will share that DM. And if not, I will share it next time. Because here's the thing. I've always said that, I am a vault when it comes to DMs and things like that. And here's the thing, I am, but I'm not going to protect bad behavior anymore. I'm just not going to do it. That's just something that I decided, this year that train stops here. So I figure if someone sends me a DM and they're not very nice, well, they voluntarily sent that. So why should I not voluntarily share it? So, but don't worry, if I do not get to share that today, I will share that next time. But that's, just TBD, just a little amuse-bouche. Also, today I have to say a couple things before I get started. I just want to thank you all sincerely for not only coming back, you all came back, which is always a mystery to me. Not a mystery, but I'm always just so shocked. I'm like, oh my God, people came back. I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and I realized that when I started this, I had a lot of people threatening me, saying I should have my license revoked and, all these other things, right? And now that I have a community of people who understand me, I just can't tell you how amazing that feels because, Reddit used to hate me. They've taken a little bit of a turn. Now, I don't look at that. I have a friend, thanks Gwen, who looks at that and just keeps me abreast of the things I need to know and doesn't tell me the things I don't need to know. But apparently there's been a little bit of a tide turning, and I just appreciate that because I know that's you all. The thing of it is that I'm going to be honest, I woke up in a spicy mood today. My printer's not working. I'm intensely aggravated. But the fact of the matter is that because of you all, I feel supported. I feel that, here's the thing. I'm not perfect. I never said I was perfect. I can be shady. I can be rude. I can be a bish, right? I can be all those things. But for those who really know me and understand me, you know that I am doing this ethically in ways that actually do help other people. I get tons of DMs about, thank you for talking about this concept and thank you for this. This helped me realize this. And, I've had years of therapy and I didn't realize this until I heard it this way. That's why I do this. I have these people who come onto my Instagram page and they try to, make noise and say that I should be ashamed of myself. And I think, I used to believe that, but now I know my worth. I know my value. I know that I'm not doing anything wrong. I know that I'm actually doing great work. And part of that is because of you all. And so I just wanted to thank you sincerely because I say this all the time, but I don't think you realize how impactful your support is for me. Because as someone who was told or made to believe that I was just the worst, that's always my factory default setting. And I always want to be open to feedback. But what I'm realizing is that when people are attacking me and making claims about things that I'm doing that I'm not doing, that's not feedback. That's an attack. And no, because here's my question. All these other Bravo accounts who have no idea what they're talking about, no clinical background whatsoever, who are diagnosing, which PS, I never do. You all know that, right? I never diagnose people. I'm the first one to say I cannot, that's not appropriate. But all these other Bravo accounts who do that without having any idea what they're talking about, that's appropriate. That's fine. It's just, it doesn't make sense. And so what I'm saying is I appreciate you all. And people who come for me this year, they better be prepared for what they get because I've just had it. I've just had it with terrible people saying terrible things and trying to make me feel terrible, and it isn't happening. So, bloop. What do you think about that? The other thing I will say before I get started is that the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl last night. My husband is a psychotic Eagles fan. We lived in Philadelphia for a period of time, for almost a decade. And so second to Chicago, Philly is my absolute favorite city. I miss living there every day. And I just want to say go Birds. Not only, here's the thing, I'm not a huge football person, but I'm forced to kind of take it in because my husband is a psychotic Eagles fan. And for people who have spouses or partners who might be psychotic Eagles fans, you know what I mean. My husband adores Taylor Swift. In fact, he has Taylor Swift shirts, totally supports Taylor Swift, Caitlin Clark. Like, my husband is a feminist, okay? But when it comes to sports, Taylor Swift came on the radio as we were driving to, where the game was being watched. And he looked at me so dead serious and he turned it off. He goes, "Not today, Melissa, not today." I'm sure that helped the Eagles win. Just kidding. It didn't at all. But one thing I want to say about this Eagles team is that, while I'm kind of speaking on a greater level about support, this team, these human beings are just earth angels. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni. I mean, these people they're just wonderful. They have a wonderful spirit. They have their heads on straight. They work as a team. There's just something really special about them. And so I think that, to me, group dynamics really interest me, whether it's football or housewives or what have you. And it just goes to show that I think when you have a team of people who have mutual respect, who don't think that they're the head of the snake, so to speak, that they all work together and they have this beautiful spirit, I think it's an analogy for how far you can take yourselves, because the Chiefs were, they got blown out of the water. No one expected that except for my husband. My husband's been predicting this for months. Kudos to the Philadelphia Eagles, the fans, the people who love that city. Congratulations. And my husband will be going to the parade, and please pray for us because I'm scared for his life. Just kidding. Okay, so let's get into this now. First, I'm going to talk about Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And since I don't have my notes, I'm actually going to be using my phone. So not that you all needed to know that, but listen, I'm an open book. And by the way, you'll notice is that I am trying something new for season 4. I think people like me a little bit better unfiltered. Before, I really was trying to be, I don't know what I was trying to be. Maybe perfect. That's just a diehard neuropathway that I'm trying to change. But I think just being authentically myself and not editing every little single thing. And, I don't know. This is what I'm trying. And please let me know your feedback. One last thing. I did hear your feedback about my first episode that I did back from season 4. I forgot to change the ad settings, and loyal listener messaged me on Instagram and was like, "It is very aggressive." And I was like, "Oh no, I forgot." So I went back in and I changed that. And so the fact of the matter is that if people want ad-free, I offer $5 subscriptions, either through Spreaker Supporters Club on Patreon. I post all of my episodes ad-free completely if that's something that interests you. But if it's not, I totally understand, because guess what? Who needs one more subscription? We all have a million subscriptions and money doesn't grow on trees. So my goal is to find ads that work for me and for you, because on my free episodes, that's how I make money, because I just believe in being transparent with you all. But I also don't want to alienate people. And here's the thing. I personally don't care about ads. I don't care if there's a million ads because I just fast forward, but I know that does bother people. And so I don't want to alienate any of you. So thank you to the person who sent me that feedback. I did immediately change that. And please continue to give me feedback. I really do want I want to make money, but I also, you matter, and your feelings and your opinions matter. And so I don't want to make money at the cost of that. So just keep me posted about that. But I think we've reached a good, happy medium. Going to Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. As you know, the first episode I did coming back was an M&M hour, and Mandy had some very strong opinions about PK. And it's so interesting. She feels very vindicated on my Instagram. She's like, see, I told you. But so at the top of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills episode, Bravo played an in memoriam of Dorit and PK's marriage. We see flashbacks of the facade falling under the pressures of multiple events, specifically the break-in, leading to the downfall of the marriage. And then you cut to Dorit saying, I'll go to war. And it's so intensely different than what she's been saying. And it's like, wow, I wonder what happened. And so Dorit ends up telling Boz that PK ghosted her after screaming in couples therapy, I want a divorce. Dorit also reveals that PK has been absent, saying he disappeared for weeks at a time without contacting her or the children. And according to what we've seen on the show, is that when Dorit is out of town, PK doesn't even watch his kids. And by the way, if like someone's saying about watching their kids, like you don't watch your own kids. I feel like I'm saying that very Midwest. You don't watch your own kids. You don't watch your own kid. Oh my gosh. Sometimes my accent, it really does creep out. But if you're a parent, you're not watching your kids. You're just being a parent. And I do think that there is such a societally imposed load on women in terms of like, you do it all. You cook, you clean, you work, you take care of the kids, and you are the one who does 90% of the caregiver burden. And like one thing I love about this generation of people is that, these partners, specifically men, are stepping in ways that certainly our generation of parents didn't. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. I think that people have corrected, and I appreciate that, because the fact of the matter is that, so Dorit said this, and you can tell she was really angry. Since this time on some of the Watch What Happens Live after shows and things like that, she has rescinded her statement, saying that PK is a wonderful father. She was very angry with him. She was just venting. But here's the thing. I feel that there's some truth to that. But I also feel that we have seen with our eyes that, again, it's like Dorit and Kyle are in the house and still taking care of the home and the children. And then PK and Mauricio have moved to these bachelor pads. And listen, when you separate, that's couple determines how to best work that, right? And so it's just the point that we are seeing PK and Mo really kind of have this like, I don't know, delayed adolescence, right? They've both been in marriages for a long time. They're out of those marriages, living on their own. And so I get it. They're human. But it's just an interesting note to me that while Dorit has walked this back, I don't know that she should have that much. Now, I understand because PK is the father of her children, and I'm sure he was really pissed about that. But the fact is that there's been a lot of rhetoric around, PK sobriety. And the truth is that our sobriety is in our health and wellness is acted out in our behaviors. You can say you're doing anything, but what we're actually doing shows our intent, our motivations, all of that. So, and of course, every week we see Dorit and Boz just like have this beautiful relationship. And every week more and more, I am really loving it. But Dorit goes on to claim that PK sent her a 7-page letter informing her that she would be financially responsible for all their bills, discussing custody, and making threats. And so Dorit puts 2 and 2 together that PK may be trying to move the divorce swiftly due to California laws that could cost him. And by the way, Pennsylvania has these same laws. And so what these laws essentially say, and trust me, all my Bish lawyers, Robin, specifically, if I am talking about this incorrectly, please come to the Patreon and school my ass. But from what I understand, in California and in Pennsylvania, marriages under 10 years, the support is typically granted for half the length of the marriage. Now, for a marriage greater to or equal to or greater than 10 years, they're considered lengthy or long-term marriages, and the court may not set a definite termination date for spousal support. And I wrote in my notes that I hope the Bravo docket would talk about this, and maybe they did. I've just been trying not to be on social media because it's a total cesspool, and Instagram is making me feel rage, which I've already explained in my last episode. What I loved, though, is that Erica was a true friend. letting Dorit know some very hard truths about moving forward, saying, if you don't make these decisions, he will make them for you. And honestly, when, Dorit's talking about like PK and reconciling, Erica says, he doesn't want you back. And I just snaps, Erica, snaps. Because sometimes being a friend means telling our friends the cold, hard truth. If PK wanted Dorit back, he would never be behaving like this. And quite frankly, it's not about getting back to anything. When there's a major shift in a dynamic, there's no going back. It's just trying to find a better way forward. And I think that's sometimes where people get mixed up. Personally, I understand that. But so it's not about getting back. It's about how do they move forward, and are they going to move forward as co-parents or as a couple? But the one thing that just really frustrated me about this is that women want to protect their partners until they are dragged to the pits of hell. And in my opinion, we need to stop glorifying ride or die behavior and normalize women no longer being whipping posts. Okay? I'm sorry. That's just, listen, 2025 Bish, she's had it. Okay, she's had it. And so I just want to remind everyone listening to this is that love is acted out in behaviors, and we do not deserve to be whipping posts for anything of the sort, any angry behavior, any frustrations, any this, any that. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Not going to happen. Speaking of no, ma'am, Sutton takes Garcelle and Kyle to Augusta to visit with her 82-year-old mother, Reba. A lot of people, myself included, thought it was very uncool that she didn't take Erica. Erica is from the South. She's filmed in the South with her mother. I think that Sutton was sending a message, which, Sutton is the one thing that I don't love about Sutton, she's very mean, rude, and she doesn't really seem to clock or understand other people's feelings whatsoever. And we've seen this time and time and time again. And so the only reason we're used to it is because we've watched this now. You remember the storyline last year when Dorit came to Kyle's and they were crying about the break-in, and she said something about my fashion designer wasn't able to come in or something. It's like, sometimes Sutton does have her head up her butt. There is immense privilege there, and I don't think she has a lot of people to check her, if I'm being honest. But we get a peek into Sutton, how she was made, when Garcelle graciously presented Reba with a gift and dragged Kyle in the process, which is so funny because the polite thing to do when you go to visit someone is to bring something, right? Alcohol is usually what people bring, which I always just want to do a quick PSA, don't, because we don't know who drinks and who doesn't. I think there's way other cooler things that we can give people for housewarming, unless you know that they really like this alcohol. That's fine. But, there's a lot of ideas out there, and Garcelle brought her this beautiful scarf, and Reba says, "A scarf?" And I thought immediately, I'm like, oh, well, okay, the apple does not fall far from the tree. And then Reba says on national TV, calls one of Sutton's children weird, and not in a funny way. In a way that's like, that one's weird. And then Sutton's response, and this is what is so wild, I've not heard anyone talk about this. Sutton's response was to be like, no, he's actually the cool one. Okay, so let me get this straight. So Sutton's two children have just been basically, run over in a drive-by of awkwardness, where her mother's claiming that the son is weird, but then Sutton's claiming that no, he's actually the cool one, which indicates that her daughter is like I don't know. And I'm just like, stop talking. Both of you stop talking. What are you even talking about? So for me, I feel like it's very clear how we're made, right? That the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And if I'm being honest, imagine if this is what Reba is willing to say, just like off the cuff on camera, it does provide a glimpse into how Sutton was made. Garcelle adeptly observed that both Sutton and her mother struggle in similar ways. And it's common to butt heads with a family member, by the way, who shares similar characteristics that we may dislike about ourselves. It's really projection 101. So I'll give you an example. My dad is the worst, but I am like him in a lot of ways. And that sucks. Sometimes it's hard. I look like him. I have a stature. We walk the same. I can be very impatient. I have all of these characteristics. And so it's common to say, well, this family member frustrates me and I have these characteristics and I don't like them. So I'm going to project. And it's just like this whole thing because it is kind of like a mind fuck, if I'm being honest. So Sutton cried as she talks about how she's impacted by her mother's behaviors. But what's sad is that she fails to have insight into how she perpetuates these similar unhealthy patterns. So that's where the work that I've done has come in handy because I'm not perpetuating these patterns. I can say, okay, this is a characteristic. This is this is the same walk, whatever that is, that's got to be genetic. But like, when you do the work, you're able to take that a step further and say, okay, so this is how my parent treated me, and this is how much it hurts. And wow, look at how I'm repeating these same patterns and hurting my children in the process. And Sutton's just not there yet, unfortunately. Sutton goes on to say, I was raised by a narcissist and I married a narcissist. I could do a podcast on this episode, and I've decided that I will. I will do an episode on narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, the role of narcissism in other personality disorders, because narcissism is a trait that we all have to varying levels. And the difference is when it crosses the threshold into disorder. And it's very complex. It's very nuanced. There's narcissism in antisocial personality disorder, which is also known as sociopathy and things like that. And so I am a human encyclopedia of this because I lived with it my whole life. And then once I stopped living with it, I started treating it. And this kind of became my go-to because everywhere I worked, they were like, you're so good at this. And no one knew why, but here we are. And so I am going to do an episode on that. It's just going to take me, I have to do my homework and I want to make sure I'm speaking about everything 100% correctly. And, I love to do my citing research studies and all things like that. So give your bish a minute and I will be bringing that to you. Garcelle offers to speak to Reba. So cut to this moment where Garcelle thinks that she can help. And I just thought, oh my gosh, Garcelle, you in danger, girl. Because, the truth is that talking to someone with significant narcissistic traits, it is futile. Growing up with narcissistic parents can have a multitude of impacts, and specifically it primes children for future relationships with people with narcissistic behaviors and tendencies. Why? Well, first, we tend to seek out what's familiar. So someone on my Instagram noted that they had a therapist who mentioned that it was kind of like a dance that we already know the steps to. And I love that analogy so much. I've never heard it, so I'm going to use that. So one of those reasons is that we're just familiar, and humans recreate patterns that are familiar, whether they're healthy or not. These types of parents are constantly moving the goalpost and changing the rules, which desensitizes children to mistreatment. And kids may not be familiar with the term gaslighting, but they know it when they feel it when it's happening. And so when you feel that as a child and you experience it as an adult, sometimes it can bring back old feelings that are not relevant to the current situation, but it feels like they are. And that's where you get someone like Bryn, where you are experiencing something in a current moment, but in reality, these are 20-year-old feelings that you just haven't processed. And so that moment feels painful. So the other thing here is that the ability to develop insight into dysfunctional family dynamics comes later in life. And by this time, characteristics can be more solidified. Lastly, narcissistic parents often teach children that love is conditional. And as a result, we spend the rest of our lives trying to convince others to love us. And here's the thing. The only two people in the world who are supposed to love us unconditionally are our parents. And when we don't get that, either at all, or maybe with one parent or not another, or what have you, we believe that we are the problem, because even a bad parent is still our parent. Children don't stop loving their parents. They stop loving themselves and then develop these characteristics where they're like, oh, well, I love my parent and they say I'm terrible, so this must be me. And, so it's like a host of very complex psychological happenings that lead to our behaviors. And quite frankly, I think it's why everyone is just walking around slinging their pain so miserable, because to dig deep into this and to look at not only how maybe you've been abused, but how your behaviors have unconsciously acted out, hurting other people. That's hard. Oh, it's gross. I've done it. It's awful. I hated it. But it allowed me to be here. And so it's worth the pain. It is possible, but I have a lot of empathy for people, anyone going through that. We see Kyle and Mauricio together for the first time this season at a gun range. Not only was it insanely distracting, audio engineers must have been pissed, because one thing I know a lot about audio now, because I have to. And as soon as I heard that, I wouldn't have blinked an eye before. I was like, those sound engineers are pissed. But it was sad. I mean, they discussed being on their own, and Kyle talking about like living at home with the ghost of their marriage and the ghost of their family's past. And it's just sad watching people who really have love just not be able to repair. And quite frankly, sometimes that happens, and it's incredibly sad. Kyle talks about grieving the loss of someone who is still here, which is incredibly challenging. When we love someone and the relationship ends, it's like, where does the love go? It's a complex emotional process that involves waves of grief and exploration of roles and identities. So when divorce happens, the entire dynamic of that family changes. All the kids' dynamics changed, especially because they're getting older. And it's just a lot. It's a lot of change. And I think people don't often get to see that big picture maybe the way that I do, studying groups and sociology and all these things. It's just like families and groups, they're have a lot of the same characteristics. And so speaking of Kyle, or speaking of like the complex roles and identities, Kyle addressed why she was mad about Garcelle, her just be a lesbian comment. So Kyle and Harry Hamlin were on Watch What Happens Live sans Rinna, which I thought was interesting. Rinna didn't even show up, because that tells me that she's pissed, honey. She is done with Andy Cohen and she's done with Watch What Happens Live, but I could be wrong. When Andy asked Kyle directly about this issue, Kyle said that she had a private, genuine, and vulnerable conversation with Garcelle, aka off-camera real talk. And she said, it, quote, "It meant a lot to me," end quote. And it made her feel closer to Garcelle. So she felt that Garcelle and Sutton, quote unquote, weaponized her vulnerability for filming. And so some people might call this a housewife hazard, but personally, I feel like someone exploring sexual identity has the right to do so privately. I do feel really strongly about that, but I do understand that she's filming a show, okay? And she gave us a whole season of Morgan Wade, and she gave us, this video. And so she participated in this fervor, right? She participated in it. And so I can see both sides, but I do strongly feel that now more than ever, LGBTQIA+, there needs to be protective factors. There needs to be consideration. There needs to be a lot of love and support. And so I see both sides of it. But then cut to Kathy holding a Capri party with the Augusta rejects. And Kathy reports that she took a DNA ancestry test. She's, quote, Chinese from 3000 BC. And Boz, literally, she looked like her head was going to explode. And she just said, "I'm sorry." And here's the thing. Kyle on Watch What Happens Live, she said her family ancestry did not contain the same information. I know, like, people commented on my Instagram, Kyle and Kathy have different fathers. Yes, I know that. But that is not the point of this very odd statement. And yes, I mean, could it be true? Absolutely. People are doing these ancestry reports and learning all very interesting things about their heritage. And I think that's wonderful. But it's just the way she said it. And Boz was like, what? Oh my God. Every episode, I feel like I can't love Boz anymore. Boz tells Kathy that Kyle has been cold and theorizes it's because Kyle is threatened by her connection with Dorit. And I'm like, oh, Boz, you in danger, girl. No, ma'am. I love that Boz isn't afraid of any OG, but at the same time, like, I don't think that was the right move. And it was a strategic move, because it just let people know she does not give a fuck. But Kathy advises that the best way to deal with Kyle is to tread lightly, make her feel comfortable and loved, which, to be honest, I like that Kathy stood up for Kyle and changed the topic, as a good sister should. The thing about sisters, it's like, it doesn't matter, it's just support, right? And I think that I love that she showed her the support. And on Watch What Happens Live, Kyle was not happy that Boz spoke to, quote unquote, my sister about this on camera. She was pissed. So, whatever. But before I transition to Real Housewives of New York, I just want to say that I feel like I'm loving Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I feel like the mid-season trailer looks absolutely amazing. And now that RHONY is done, I'll be able to cover these shows without being deceased on Wednesdays, because having to cover two shows, it's too much. It's crazy. But let's move on to Real Housewives of New York, where we see the final part of the reunion. We watch Brynn finally understand the impact of her behaviors on Jessel and Pavitt. Brynn said, "I know my intention, but I said something wrong." And so Mandy and I talked about intent versus impact. And so intent is what someone intends to do, while the impact is the result of those actions. And the fact is, if we're responsible for how our behaviors impact other people despite our intentions. I asked that like a question, but it wasn't a question. So let me say this again. The fact is, we are responsible for how our behaviors impact others despite our intentions. So Brynn is again confronted regarding warning Ubah against being an angry Black woman, indicating that it may deter Oliver. And here's the thing. This is projection 101. And I know a lot of people, between this situation and Garcelle visiting Reba in the South, there's definitely a lot of subtext in terms of racism and, cultures around that. And so that can't be understated. But I do believe that Brynn feels inherently unlovable and projects this feeling onto Ubah, who is just unabashedly herself. So in other words, it's not about Ubah, but it's still not okay. And the one thing I love about Ubah is her confidence and wisdom, saying that we need to be loved for who we are. And she's right. When people, it makes me crazy. Specifically, I'm going to call Jeff Lewis out for this, which is like, he talks about like, hiding who you are to like when you first like show up. He and Dr. Donna talk about like, you send your representative, and it's like, don't do that. Don't send your representative, because that's how you end up unhappy. How you end up deliriously happy? Be yourself, balls to the wall, and whoever loves you for that, that's your person or your people. Because it's, we don't all just have one person, and friends, romantic relationships, whatever it is. Be you, boo. And then people will love you anyway. And not anyway, even, but like people will just love you because, gosh, I could just talk about a whole episode on this. So the fact is that Brynn again apologizes, which Ubah graciously receives, which becomes the theme of the night. Okay, now I'm going to get real sassy here when I talk about Becky with the good hair, Rebecca Minkoff, which, by the way, is a shout out to Beyonce's Lemonade. And I'm so glad Beyonce finally won and is just, I just love Beyonce. What's not to love? I used to like Pavitt until he talked about wanting an Elon Musk over a Beyonce. And I was like, we're done here. No. So anyway, Becky with the good hair comes on. She said quick and dirty. That's literally what she said, because that's what it was. It was quick and it was dirty, and get off our screens forever, because I can't with you. And when you think I'm being mean, let me explain why I'm so irritated with her. First of all, we see a flashback of Rebecca saying she joined the cast to recoup lost business. Snooze. Go away. That's gross. So she's peppered with questions about Scientology, which I loved, and it steadily increased her defenses, and you could just see she was getting more and more angry. And so Andy calls her out for robotically giving Scientology talking points, to which she angrily sniped, "It's a world-recognized religion." And I'm like, sure, Jan. So let me give you a little background of the Minkoff family, because journalist Bish looked into some stuff, and guess what I found? The Daily Mail reported that the Minkoffs are one of the most powerful families within the church. Rebecca and her family have been awarded the, quote, Diamond Meritorious, unquote, status for hitting the $5 million mark in donations. Okay, what does that mean? That means, this to me explains everything. She is protecting terrible people. So you've donated all this money, you've ingratiated your whole family into this very sick thing. And to be clear, Scientology is a sick thing. I don't know what you want to call it, but, I reserve judgment because I never want to talk about a religion in ways like this that is hurtful to people or is just like really strong. But one thing I can tell you is that Leah Remini and a man called Mike Rinder, who, by the way, he just recently passed away from cancer, which is devastating, but they did a series, a documentary, and of course I'm forgetting what it's called, where they exposed the abuses of Scientology that they personally witnessed firsthand and how they once supported this and then once they found out they had to walk away and how they were literally harassed for speaking their truth about it, which, that's normal, right? To talk about something and then have people like, well, I'm going to stalk you. Yeah, that sounds like a normal group to me. So in Scientology, the Minkoffs are clearly royalty, but Rebecca, aka Becky with the good hair, has made the mistake of thinking that because she's special with Scientology, because her family bought her way in, that other people are going to buy her bag of bullshit. And she was just pissed that they didn't. She literally is surrounded by people who just talk about Scientology like, meet more, it's good, meh, 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 just like completely ignoring all of the abuses. And so what abuses? Well, let me tell you, because Rebecca Minkoff's father was a part of these abuses. All right. Rebecca's father is Dr. David Minkoff. In 1995, Lisa McPherson died while under the care of the Church of Scientology. The subsequent lawsuit resulted in a $100,000 settlement, and David Minkoff lost his medical license. Allegedly, he prescribed sedatives over the phone to third-party church staff handling Lisa McPherson's care without ever even meeting her. Okay. Now, Lisa McPherson, she has passed away, and there's a lot of stuff there. Okay. Maybe I need to do a deep dive on this, but guess what? Did a little more digging, and you know what else I found? According to Radar Online, David Minkoff has been added. Now, this is a trigger warning. I'm going to tell you that right now. Has been added to an ongoing lawsuit involving the suicide of a woman who I won't name. And the reason for that is I don't know if her family would want me to name or not. And so I'm just being extra cautious. And so I'm calling her Jane Doe. But the complaint includes allegations that Jane Doe reached out to Dr. Minkoff, reporting mental health struggles. And instead of offering medical treatments, was the doctor, quote unquote, Dr. Minkoff's suggestions aligned with Scientology practices. So the lawsuit seeks to prove that David Minkoff's lack of medical care resulted in her death. And the Church of Scientology, let me be clear, this sets me on fire. And it makes me just want to do an episode. Oh gosh, it just makes me want to bring them down. But the Church of Scientology is known to oppose most modern psychiatric methods, instead believing, quote, the spiritual healing is the proper treatment for mental illness. So let me be clear about what that means. It's pray it away. Pray the gay away, pray the mental illness away, pray it all away. And let me tell you, that is fucking bullshit. Mental health and physical health are legitimate and they require legitimate treatments, which there are many legitimate treatments. Praying it away isn't one of them. Now, let me be clear. For people who are religious and find prayer is a beautiful thing, please don't misunderstand. I believe in, freedom of religion, and prayer is a beautiful thing, but that's not what this is. And so let me just be really clear about that for people, especially anyone listening to this who wants to parse my words and use it to show how I'm an awful person and I should just die. So Rebecca claims calling Scientology a cult is hate speech. So let me be clear about this. Hate speech is defined as public speech that expresses hate or encourages violence towards a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. Asking questions about Scientology's long documented history of abuses isn't hate speech. It's critical thinking, sweetie. Becky announced her departure on social media, and I just thought it was so cute. She felt she needed to announce it because literally she walked off the stage and no one cared. No one said goodbye. Everyone was like, oh, you're still here. And I'm sorry, it just makes me laugh because I just have no tolerance for people who use the armor of a quote unquote religion to harm people. I just can't do that. Sorry. Here's the thing. The reunion took an unexpectedly beautiful turn when the women model immense emotional intelligence, empathy, and compassion. Another trigger warning here. We watched the group support Bryn regarding sexual assault while simultaneously holding her accountable. And so I just wanted to focus on this for a minute, is that, the women said, no one here doubts anything that happened. No one doubts it. And I think that moment, I guarantee you, this act of love led Bryn to feel safe enough to be honest. And she was honest when she explained how the events in Puerto Rico unfolded, saying, I didn't feel loved by you guys. I was hurt. And I previously theorized that Bryn was trying to get her needs met of love and support. And I theorized that this was the underlying reason for her claim against RHOBH. And Sai said, you weaponized your experience for the downfall of a friend. And just because this wasn't Bryn's intent, she struggles to acknowledge the impact. But she eventually got there and was able to apologize, to which RHOBH responded, I forgive you. And let me be clear, RHOBH is the GOAT when it comes to emotional intelligence, because holding on to anger and resentment is like drinking poison and wanting somebody else to die. They say that in the program of AA, is that forgiveness is for us. It's not for the other person. It's for us, so that we can be free and happy, joyous, and free and not hold on to stuff. But it's hard to do, right? Because we're humans and emotions are involved. And so feelings aren't facts, but we watch in real time how Bryn gets feelings and facts mixed up. And when I talked in the beginning of this episode about sometimes like trauma survivors can get confused about emotions, like old emotions in new situations, this is a prime example. Jenna says, we reached out immediately and you said you didn't want to talk about it and you completely shut down. And then Bryn cried and she kind of said, like in this rude way, she was like, yeah, Jenna, sometimes people shut down. And Jenna was like, yeah, exactly. You do. That's okay. But we don't say that we didn't reach out when we did. And so because Bryn feels alone, she assumes she is alone. Bryn is unaware that she's surrounded by a group of amazing women who will love her if she allows it. She doesn't realize that she's getting in her own way. And I have an immense amount of compassion for Bryn because her trauma is clearly driving the bus. But it's also not an excuse to continually run people over with the bus. That's just not okay. So Bryn's not a bad person. She just needs to develop the readiness to become aware of how she slings her pain, and to understand intent versus impact. But I loved seeing RHOBH and Bryn have a very tough but vulnerable conversation. RHOBH might be spicy, but my gosh, she is magnanimous with a heart of pure gold. Now, Bryn says she avoids things when she's scared, which is the literal definition of avoidance. And RHOBH was a good friend and better human, letting her know she needed to apologize to the group. Bryn refused to have this tough conversation because she didn't feel loved by them. And I'm telling you, if a trauma survivor does not feel loved, they cannot feel vulnerable. And the problem is not feeling loved sometimes is our own stuff. Because the group clearly loves her and they clearly gave her a ton of grace with all this. But Bryn didn't want to have the tough discussion because she doesn't feel safe enough to feel vulnerable. And Jenna eloquently discussed two things can be true. We can support Bryn's reports of sexual assault while also being angry with her behaviors. It takes a significant level of emotional intelligence to understand this concept first. But second, to apply it to life, that's next level shit. And my heart swelled watching these amazing women put their beef aside to support one another. And I just thought, where has this been all season? Because this is beautiful. This we want to see. And I love seeing Bryn receive both the love and the consequences that she needed. The women gave Bryn the love and safety she sought and resulted in her putting down her defenses and sincerely understanding and owning her impact. And so I always say we can only do better once we know better, but I hope that Bryn is able to do the work to free herself from the shackles of trauma, because from one survivor to another, I can see that she's shackled. I can see when people are shackled and I know how to free them and I want to do it, but I also have to be like, hey, bish, slow your roll. That ain't your job. So I just hope that maybe, I don't know, this helps somebody, because I just felt like previously you heard me say to Mandy that I just I felt there was no way for this group to move forward. And honest to God, I take it back. I think these women rallied, gave us a beautiful ending to a semi-disastrous season. And I kind of would like to see. Now, here's the thing. I will say this. If Bryn came back and just did the same thing, I wouldn't love that. And she may not be capable of doing it different. But I don't know. I kind of want to see. I do think Bryn still needs to unshackle herself from trauma, but I don't know. We don't get to decide what she does. And so honestly, I just hope that she's happy. Oh my gosh, I have talked so much. And okay, so let me talk about Real House of Salt Lake City. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk about Southern Charm another time. And I'm sorry to do that to you all because I know people are going to be mad. But I promise I will share my DM with you all just next time. So going to Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, we see Brittany whining about not getting a grand entrance at the beginning and being excluded from the final group discussion at the end. It was so on brand. Brittany and Jared continued to have a toxic, developmentally stunted relationship. And I think that Brittany and Jared behave like teenagers, quite literally, poorly covering up bad behavior that the church, aka their parents, would punish them for. And so it's just a good reminder that humans recreate familiar patterns, because I'm thinking to myself, in reality, Jared and Brittany are adults and literally not one person cares about their sex life. But because of the culture that they've grown up in, they think that they're special and their behaviors matter to anyone. And I'm sorry, they don't. It's kind of wild. And so they've just convinced themselves that they're the most important people in the world, that they need to be held to the standard and all of this other stuff. And listen, some of that's cultural. Some of that's what Mormonism teaches. And some of it is, I don't know, self-importance. And, what I didn't love is that Heather talks about how the Osmonds are Salt Lake City royalty. And I was like, why? And so let me be clear. Bronwyn read a DM that Jared sent her, which I'm telling you made me so angry. I'm like, let me read to you first what the DM said, because I literally paused and I wrote and I paused and I wrote and I made sure to get direct quotes. So Bronwyn claims Jared is categorically the worst. And this is the DM he sent her. And it's full of curses, which I'm just going to say. So just be aware. What the fucking hell is your fucking problem? Are you fucking kidding me? Coming out on national television, making fun of my anatomy, you little bitch. Do you even understand the backlash I'm getting on social media? I guarantee I am twice the size of any man you've ever been with. I'm disgusted by what a low vibrational human being you are to disparage me like that, all for the sake of trying to earn your spot on a show. Then he says, I could certainly pick apart all of your anatomy, but I'll remain classy in the public eye and keep it between you and I. Let's just soak in the misogyny and the hate of that DM. That is so disgusting that a man feels totally comfortable sliding into a woman's DMs saying that kind of stuff is beyond. Okay, let me be clear. Jared is a piece of shit, and get him off of our screens immediately. And if Brittany can't keep herself away from this human piece of shit, then she needs to go too. So what I didn't like here is Brittany grasped at straws, claiming Bronwyn knew the real reason why she was estranged from her daughters, and Brittany claims that Bronwyn poisoned her daughters against her. Sure, Jan, this is beyond pathetic, and Brittany needs to understand the call is coming from inside the house. Brittany can point the finger all she wants, but she is the reason why her children don't talk to her, and people can get mad about that all they want. Someone got mad about something I said about Monica and her mom, and you can think it's harsh, but I just don't have room for terrible people. If you want to defend someone terrible, please go right ahead. But that's never going to be something I'm going to do. Bronwyn made it clear that Brittany's daughters don't want to be on the show. They don't want to be talked about on the show. And then flashback to Brittany's casting tape where she literally laughs about being estranged from her daughters. So the cold hard truth is that Brittany is her own problem. She continually chooses her toxic relationship over being present for her daughters. And she also used her daughters as an excuse after purposely recording the women and then lying about it 100 times, effectively disregarding the only boundary her children have ever set. They set one boundary that said, don't talk about us. And then what does she do? Use them for storylines. So perhaps this is the reason why her kids don't talk to her. Maybe. Heather's correct saying that Brittany's living a double life. And so when humans repress urges in order to adhere to idealistic religious values, things come out sideways. Cultural shame around sex and Mormonism wreaks havoc on developing minds learning to manage it all. Reaction formation is a defense mechanism where a person unconsciously expresses behaviors or attitudes that are the opposite of their true feelings or desires, often in an exaggerated way to mask anxiety-provoking thoughts or impulses. So essentially, acting completely opposite to how they feel inside to avoid discomfort. And that's what I think is happening here. They're holding themselves to this weird standard that's making them both behave in ways that's just gross. And I don't find that entertaining. But the one thing that I did love was Meredith's bat mitzvah being featured, especially during a time where anti-Semitism is so rampant. Loved. That's probably one of the few things about Meredith I respect and appreciated. But we also got a reminder of like how traumatic Bronwyn's dog bite was. And then learning that she cared for the dog who attacked her tells me that she's an empathetic survivor. But also someone said that my friend Gwen told me that there was something else there about some sort of lawsuit. So I have to gather more information and come back about that because I completely forgot about it till now. But Meredith also reveals that she's spoken to Jen Shaw and completely brushed it off despite claiming to be traumatized against Monica. Meredith said that Jen admitted guilt, served her time, and is paying restitution as if this somehow absolves her from stealing from the elderly. So let me just be clear about one thing is that when you take advantage of a vulnerable population like the elderly, it's called elder abuse. And people who do that lack empathy. And when you lack empathy, that's not something you can get. You can't grow it. I use this analogy because it seems a lot of people really like it, but it's like having an amputated limb and just growing it back. It's not humanly possible. Now, listen, I hope science finds a way to do that. Mazel, that'd be great. But for right now, growing empathy is not possible. So I'm just going to leave that there. Jen can do all the time she wants. She can, and by the way, she didn't volunteer to do it. Does anyone else remember that Jen Shaw literally claimed until about 2 seconds before her plea deal that she was not guilty? Okay, this is not someone who's sorry. This is not someone who deserves redemption. Sorry, she's not. And I can tell you this right now. If she comes back on Bravo, whatever it is, I'm not watching. I don't care if she joins Salt Lake back, won't be watching it. I will never, never support that woman. So the last thing I want to say here is that, I feel like Mary really was the voice of reason here, which like, what the hell's going on? Saying, that like bringing up valid reasons to draw boundaries with Jen, and Meredith promptly disregards it because it doesn't fit her view. And that's the thing with Meredith is she is unable to see anything outside of herself. Moving on to Lisa has a vulnerable moment admitting it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to be myself. I'm one of 6 kids. I disappeared in my family. I could have been trafficked and my parents wouldn't have noticed. I protect myself all the time. And honestly, this did help me develop empathy for Lisa's obnoxious behaviors because they are obnoxious. But kids who are emotionally neglected or emotionally abandoned altogether experience lifelong psychological impacts, such as becoming developmentally stuck at the age it began and using acting out behavior to demand attention. Little Lisa deserved better, but adult Lisa needs to know how to do better. And that's the thing. Trauma isn't our fault, but it is our responsibility to fix. And that sucks. I mean, let me be clear, that sucks. It's not fair. It ain't right. It's not right, but it's okay. You know that song? It's not right, but it's okay. Okay. And we're going to make it anyway. So Lisa explained why she can't burn it with Whitney, saying you are hurtful when you keep saying things about the only people I have over and over. These are my people. And honestly, I I don't know that I've ever sided with Lisa until now, but I understand Lisa's mama bear instincts. Like, don't say stuff about the only people I have, like my guys, like my husband, my two boys, like these are my people. Don't say stuff over and over. And honestly, I don't think Jesus. I don't think Whitney brought a lot to this season. I think she was trying to do something, maybe because she felt like her job was in jeopardy. And if I'm being honest, I am not sure what she's bringing. And so the Salt Lake reunion ended with a healthier version of the Puerto Vallarta game. Andy's message to Mary was the cherry on top of an amazing season. And I just want to say, this is how you do it. Kudos to all. Kudos to all. Being able to say something nice about someone we are angry with says a lot about our character. And these housewives are upping their emotional intelligence game, and I'm here for it. Even Lisa Barlow was like, the only two people who really could not get there was Meredith and Brittany. Even Lisa Barlow got there. So if I'm being honest, my opinion is Meredith and Brittany need to go, and even keep Whitney and see how it is. And what happened to Miley? Like, did Miley just she was there and then she was gone and she wasn't even at the reunion? So justice for Miley. That's my question. What happened to her? Did I miss something there? I'm not sure. So either way, this is going to be it for me today. Please stay tuned this week. I will be doing a bite-sized bish, and I will be doing a special subscriber-only episode where I answer questions that were submitted on my Patreon. If you want to take part of that, go over to my Patreon, Your Bish Therapist. You can also look up Melissa Reich and check that out. So I just want to say thank you all again so much. I hope you've enjoyed this very raw, unfiltered version of me, and I just adore you all. Sending my love to you and yours, and ta-ta for now until next time. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Great Heart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT Podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, hear on YBT Podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.